As I said to Scott, it's like, driving in cars with comedians. This is designing startups with strategists.
This is going to be not just the innovation show, this is going to be the innovation game.
Using a Jason Possible framework, seeing around corners. Which ones of these kind of resonate with you?
They all do.
Now, where do you think you want to start up your startup in the Emerald Isle?
We're going to get you to incubate in real time by actually having you play a slightly different game. Any of these like sparking an idea? How would you combine any of these to create something new?
Almost like a network effect of cells around the ocean. Those two sparked for me.
How do you think you did, Mr.
I
McCullen?
have no idea, man. I have no idea. This is new for me.
Welcome to all of you joining us live on LinkedIn and YouTube on January 1st, 2025, because you have a tradition of doing new things on the first day of the year. Last year, January 1st, 2024, you launched your Centaurian Substack. That was awesome. A couple of weeks later, we did our first episode of Tonic, the AI thought show with Kes and Scott. You're Kes, I'm Scott. I'm a curious human. You're my best friend and partner in possibility. Kes, it is such a thrill to kick off this new season, this new year of Tectonic with none other than Aidan McCullen.
Look, this has been a dream come true in a lot of ways. As you have said, like this brings together all of my superpowers. Brains, gains, AI, bringing it together, the show before the show. Ooh, revealing a little too much of Aidan's story. But look, what we did last year was just a warm-up act. What we're trying to do now is going to be amazing.
That's right. And it is sincerely, I said this to Aidan, you've heard me say this countless times, it is such a pleasure and a sincere privilege to have Aidan McCullen as our first guest. Now, one of the things that we, of course, went into was Aidan's first guest on his show, The Innovation Show, who was Seth Godin, an absolute hero, a legend, living legend, who is going to be a part of the Reinvention Summit in April. But Aidan McCullen, we met him earlier last year through our partner, Rita McGrath. And I'm going to be honest with you, Kes. I as we always do, we both prepped a bunch before that first conversation with Aidan. And it was like, who is this guy? And he's a former professional rugby player who has this really successful podcast, right? The Innovation Show. And I was like, all right, so is this just another jock who has like rebranded himself as, business guru, right? Seen it. We got on that first Zoom conversation with Aidan, and I was instantly like, as you have said so many times, I was happy to be wrong. Aidan McCullen is the real deal. We've been talking about this since our conversation with Aidan 2 days ago, and we're going to roll that in just a moment. But Aidan McCullen, his website, aidanmccullen.com, he is a true blue innovator. He is a learn-it-all. He may have been a professional rugby player, because if there's anything I have come to learn about Aidan McCullen, he is a legit infinite gamer. There were so many gems in this conversation. He talks about immortal jellyfish. We talk about phoenixes. We talk about purple cows, deaf frogs. You'd think it was a biology show. But what we actually did, of course, we talk about his story. And one of the things he does, I can't wait for folks to hear, Aidan McCullen does one of the most amazing Simpsons impressions I've ever heard. It is spot on. But what we weave into this, we're not just here doing another podcast, and just doing another talking head interview. Look, it's great. We're trying to do a little bit of Colin and Samir, zoom out, get a sense of, who he is, how he got to where he is. And then we also mixed in a game. So talk a little bit about this format and this trifecta that we've hit, which is games, brains, and AI.
Look, touched on it a little earlier. This has been my life mission, understanding how our brains work, understanding games, really getting into I launched something called motivational design, the neuroscience behind our motivations and game design, and then AI. This has been my ultimate research, which I started 30 plus years ago, neural networks, deep learning, bringing it all together, right? But here's the thing, which I wanted to do as we're designing the show, really processing everything which we got from the last couple of years of what we've been doing and understanding the future media. What we wanted to do was take the tagline from this summit, which is going to be in April, in Ireland, the Reinvention Summit, which Aidan McCullen is hosting. And we're going across, we're bringing a whole crew together. But the tagline is Davos for doers. So that sort of really resonated with me. So this concept of, I said it in the little intro piece, which is like, comedians in cars, in getting coffee, or like that sort of concept. What we wanted to do is put real strategists, big thinkers, big innovators, and go, we're going to put you on the spot. So one of the things we've been doing at LSGC, which is leading strategic growth and change at Columbia Executive Business School with Rita McGrath, is taking AI and teaching it in a very unique way using a game format. I'm a game designer. I created a game out of it. How do you create a startup and then a sim, which is strategic imagination machine? So one of the things that which we've designed over the last year to test out how that startup's going to do. And we wanted to put these big thinkers on the spot. So we put Aidan on the spot. So this is part game, part brains, part AI, all together with, our dream guest, Aidan McCullen, our first guest, the guy he's the real deal. When we got on and we started brainstorming ideas, like he just rolled with it. It is like, you can tell he is ideas first, innovation, true blue. So yeah, he might have started as a rugby player, but he's always been an innovator.
He is a fellow curious human, and it is no small pleasure or privilege to bring to you our totally reinvented Tonic, the AI thought show with Kes Scott, featuring Aidan McCullen. Going to be not just the innovation show, this is going to be the innovation game. And you're going to show people how you think.
As I said to Scott, it's like, driving in cars with comedians. This is designing startups with strategists. So that's the loose format, which we're sort of trying to do. Cool. We've got this AI tool. We've been doing it at Columbia with Rita, with the leaders, and it's really resonated. And then as we were playing with it, we realized like what we really want to do is have these amazing conversations with strategists and have them like take everything they knew, theoretically, or things they've done in their career.
Tonic, the AI thought show with Kes Scott. It's been absolutely
Enterprise Island, but then
this is going to be not just the innovation show, this is going to be the innovation game. And you're going to show people how you think.
As I said to Scott, it's like, driving in cars with comedians. This is designing startups with strategists. So that's the loose format, which we're sort of trying to do. Cool. We've got this AI tool. We've been doing it at Columbia with Rita, with the leaders, and it's really resonated. And then as we were playing with it, we realized like what we really want to do is have these amazing conversations with strategists and have them like take everything they knew, theoretically, or things they've done in their careers and kind of go, all right, let me design a startup. Like if I could design a startup.
What would I do? Yeah.
So to start this off, we're going to reinvent. That's what reinvention is all about. You've been doing it your entire life. Kes and I have both been reinventing ourselves continuously. And the way that it starts is choosing from an arena. And, this is one of those concepts that, of course, we've taken from our partner, our boss, Rita McGrath, and you're a huge fan as well. How do you think about arenas? And these are the 5 that we've identified, 5 arenas that you're gonna choose from to play, to spin up your startup in Ireland. How do you think about arenas? And then as you look at these 5, the Digital Innovation Hub, the Green Technology Center, Life Sciences Cluster, Financial Innovation Zone, and Advanced Manufacturing, what, and Kes, I know you've got some high level thoughts too. Before we dive in, give you a chance to incubate here a little bit, Aidan.
Look, what I was going to say is like we've done a whole bunch of research. So when we did the thing at Columbia, it was for MENA, which is Middle East and North Africa. Like, so what Scott and I have been doing is sort of pulling together where we've been seeing where Ireland's going. So not only looking at the last 20 years and, that program which Rita was part of for Enterprise Island, but then also playing it forward. So using a Jason Possible framework, seeing around corners, and then thinking about which arenas are going to get impacted. So, there's a lot behind how we got to these. And again, it's like we can share more of it, but just to give you a little bit of the background, but it's like, which ones of these kind of resonate with you?
They all do, but I think Ireland has a real opportunity in the fact that it's an island as well, that we miss. That it's almost like it can be used as a prototype because it's small, and then you look at, well, what's it known for? And apart from the various alcohols, we're known for our green, the aspect of being green. So I would pick number 2, the Green Technology Center, for that reason. But the others are all kind of there. I don't think, and this might be controversial, I don't think we're good at innovation. I think that's a weakness that we really need to work on, and we are. I know there's some programs in place to make Ireland a better innovation hub, but I don't think we've been great at scaling or organizations and then making them global. And I don't know whether that's maybe Irish thinking, that we might think smaller because we're smaller, and maybe it's cultural. I often think about the cultural aspect of that so many people in the US were immigrants, and they were like entrepreneurs because they had to be. They had absolutely no choice. And a lot of people in Ireland then were suppressed in some way, and and if you think about it now, there's a reliance on multinationals in Ireland as well, which isn't helping that. So we need to break that paradigm, that mental paradigm, to become more, to believe in ourselves more, to not have what we talked about, Kes, there, that whole over humility, self-deprecation that we do in Ireland. I think we need to break that. But I think a place we can really, really play is green and sustainability, because of our shorelines, because of our forestry, and also we have reinvented as well. We used to rely heavily on peat and turf as fuel, and that organization called Board Namona has reinvented itself as well. So we have great examples of that. And then we have the pastures. We have companies like Kerry, Tier Lawn, who create Kerry Gold butter. Those brands that are known globally, they would all play into that area. So that's why I'm picking number 2.
I spent a little bit of time with the Innovation Show last night, and I created a Goodreads shelf with
nice.
as many of the books as I could, 382 of them.
I should have done that, man. You're making me look bad here.
Well, how could I make you look bad, Aidan? Because you were the one who chose all of these books, and it's a fascinating peek into your brain. So, how did you start? Like when I scroll all the way down on SoundCloud, right? Here's your intro theme, and then episode number 1 with Seth Godin. Like, how did that even happen? That's amazing.
But you know the way people say there was always a book before the book? So there was a show before the show. So I'll tell you the origin story, because actually it's a story of resistance to change and a story of being told you can't do it by the powers, right? So I joined the national broadcaster here, and within a week I knew, oh man, this was a mistake. Everything, like I remember feeling the energy in the room and kind of going, oh my God, what is this? It must be the high ceilings or something like that. But it was just this low frequency of energy, of fear, of untapped potential in people, and a leader that actually tried to keep them there, to keep them in check, because therefore she'd have more power. And she had this board, and on the board were, again, a mix of sycophants, people, yes men and women, and then people who were afraid of telling the truth. And I came from a totally different business before, and I came from an entrepreneurial media company where you tried and you tried and you kept doing stuff. And if you weren't doing stuff, you weren't doing much. So I came to this different environment, and it was a public broadcaster. And I was asked to come up with an idea for the player we were building, which was like a Netflix. So I said straight away, I was like, oh, well, it's got to be as good as Netflix. You know that. It can't be subpar, because that's the bar for people now. And on top of that, you have to pay a license fee for this national broadcaster. So I was asked to come up with this idea. I had nothing to do with it. I was like, you know, we have all these people living in Ireland now who aren't Irish, who are craving content that is educational and somewhat edutainment. And I said this idea of the innovation show, I said it's really nice for sponsors as well, because most shows, when you hear the word innovation, people think of technology. I was like, it's a mix of technology, resistance to change, strategy, theories behind technology, etc. So I was told straight away, we tried that before. I was like, there it is. Because my old boss, who I left really well with before, he remembers saying, they're going to kill all your ideas. And he appeared to me in this little cloud, like in The Simpsons, going, ha ha. And I was like, no, man, I'm not letting this happen. So this was in the digital department. And a guy who worked for that entrepreneur he ran one of the radio stations. So I walked into him in the radio station, and I just said to him, I said, Dan is his name, Dan Healy, great guy. I said, Dan, I had a one-pager. I was like, what do you think of this idea? And it was just a few lines of what the themes would be, what the format would be, etc. And he goes, great idea. He says, we have no content like that. He said, what kind of budget do you have? And I was like, well, I was going to ask you that. What budget do you have? And he goes, have you got a presenter? And I said, no, that's what I was meeting you about. And he goes, why don't you do it? And I was like, oh, no, man, I've never done anything like that before. And he said, but you do rugby commentary. So I used to be a co-commentator on rugby. And co-comment's quite easy. I mean, all you're doing is commentating on specific parts after the fact, like a great move or a try or the equivalent of a touchdown. So it's kind of much easier. But with the show, you're the anchor. So he goes, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a loan of a producer, this guy, Alan Swan. I'll give you Alan for 6 weeks. He'll help you get set up, and then you're on your own. So I started that, did that show. And again, what I started to do was scan the internet for incoming people into Ireland who were speaking at events. And then I'd either go to the event, get in a taxi and bring them to the studio, or I'd order them a taxi and bring them to the studio and interview them and send them home in a taxi. And they were great. They were delighted because it was national broadcaster, national access. So that's how it started. And the best thing about this was I didn't tell anyone. So I didn't tell my boss or anything like that. I just, the whole idea, ask for forgiveness, not permission. I had that branded into my brain. So I do this, and a few weeks later, we're having this meeting again, and my boss goes, "Hey, how's that idea coming along, the innovation show?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, great! It's on episode 13, and it's top of the tech charts." She nearly had an aneurysm. It was great. But in doing so, I always talk about this stuff on my show, that idea of asking for forgiveness, not permission, is not actually a great idea, because you run out of runway. And I soon ran out of runway then, because I had no support then, because I had done this thing done it behind the scenes, tried to build it, thinking that was quite a good thing. And then I'd be able to go, but it's successful. So what she tried to do then is move me off it and hand it over and find somebody to run the show. So pretty soon I was like going, this isn't working, this relationship, this job. And I was given an ultimatum actually to go. I was like, well, what do you want from me? And she's like, I want you to stop doing your stupid show. I want you to stop writing. Because that's when I started writing first, actually, because I was trying to find another medium for this brilliant content I stumbled upon. So when you're doing interviews, you pull out nuggets and they mix with your own ideas, and then you can create something new. The whole idea of that combinatory thinking. So you combining different ideas together. So I'd start to write that and publish that. And she wanted me to stop doing that. And she's like, and I want you to sit out there like everyone else. And I kind of did one of these slow head turns and looked out to everyone else and was kind of going, I don't think that's a good idea. So I left. And I want to say this, it's so hard to leave because it was what we call in Ireland a cushy number. So a cushioned job, great pension, no stress for people who don't want to achieve things, but stressful for someone who wants to build something. So really stressful for me. I couldn't stand it. And the biggest challenge for something like that is I have 2 kids and a wife. And when you're going and you're taking what's really a selfish decision to go, I can't do this. I will rot. My brain will rot away if I do this. And you have this, I remember having this moment. I was in the gym and I looked in the mirror and I was like, okay, just suck it up. Just we'll do this. And then I said, I can't. And it was like my reflection was talking about to me, man, we can't do this. So I pulled out of it and went on, and it was the best thing I ever did. And years later, actually, it was revealed that there were so many problems in that organization that it was validated. And so many people got in touch with me and were like, oh, well done for leaving, but at the time, so difficult. And these are the challenges you face when you take these entrepreneurial pursuits. So that's how the show started. That was the show before the show. So that's why I'm picking number 2.
Well, I love it too, because lean into the brand. It's the Emerald Isle.
Exactly.
So, why not lean into that? So that's the first step, right? Where to play. This notion of the arena that you're going to choose. And I love your rationale there, Aidan. So we've got the arena, this green technology center, some of these key powers. And we've, as Kes said, in the background, what's running this sim is a tremendous amount of research that we've done that plays into, trends and data from a number of different research reports about what's happening in Ireland, and actually developing out almost like role-playing game, character sheets for some of these different arenas and some of the other elements that we're going to get into. So we've got some of these key powers of your chosen arena, the Green Technology Center, aka the Emerald Forge. Where do you want to start this? Now, you could go for Dublin, which it leans more digital. The vast majority of the startups are happening there in Dublin. We've got Cork, the legacy of agriculture transforming itself, being more innovative around ag tech. Galway, be still my heart. I love Galway. That place is just magical. And the notion that digital media and storytelling is on the rise out there. As you said, you're an island. You've got these coastal opportunities to do innovation. And then, also thinking about energy and Shannon. So where, you've got this arena. Now, where do you think you want to start up your startup in the Emerald Isle?
So one of the reasons I think people tend towards the Dublin, Cork, Galways is accessibility. And it's, as you know yourselves, it's easier to fly into Dublin. So there is an ocean startup near, just not far from Dublin Airport. It's probably about 40 minutes in a place just off a place called Drogheda. And I think I'd go there. So I'd go outer Dublin, and the reason being that accessibility.
So let's see how well.
So we'll go 1.
So we're going to go with 1 and try to specify that it's going to be in outer Dublin.
The Seth Godin piece. So I reached out to Seth. I'd followed him for a long, long time. I'd read most of his books, and I reached out to him. I knew he answered his emails. And here's the thing I did. I interviewed a lady who wrote a book on how to write perfect emails. And I'd interviewed her on the other show, and I used her format to email Seth. And Seth came back immediately and said yes. And I was like, oh, yes.
Seth Godin has been a hero of mine and inspiration for so long.
He is. I love the idea of being remarkable. The simplicity of it, that somebody will remark about it. It's remarkable. And that if you try to do that. Hey, you should show for those people watching us your special editions of the Purple Cow. I don't think people have seen that. Are they easily accessible there? I thought that was so cool.
Look, I can get it. Give me 1 second. So here's the Purple Cow marketing. His Purple Cow marketing book is still inside. This is one of the sealed ones. And, like you had to buy 12 of them, which I love as a marketing idea. And I gave them away with my business plan. So as I went and asked people for funding and support or join the project, I would send them my Purple Cow marketing plan with the milk carton. And, basically, I had to tell people to open it because I realized the first one I sent, like it was actually a friend of the family's, and he was like, yeah, look, the marketing plan makes sense. I love the milk carton. I gave it to my grandson. I was like, did he read the book inside? He goes, oh, there was a book inside? I thought he just sent me a milk carton.
Brilliant. One thing we should all strive for is, and I didn't do this in sport enough, is that you actually only really make progress when you embrace who you are and you stop trying to emulate somebody else, that you create something totally unique, that's you, really it's you in it. And I think that's what he really did. He just embraced himself and he embraced his way of doing things and then just kept doing the work. That's the thing. People miss the discipline behind something like him, like a blog every day. And it's even going through Christmas there every day. So that means planning to go, I'm going to write something every day, because it's not just filler. Like, you unsubscribe from so many newsletters that you receive today because there's so much information, but his things are always well considered, and that takes huge discipline.
He's like, he works for like 15 hours a day, even now.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's how he gets to write so many things, write so many books. It's pretty impressive. The prototype game I created and sent to Seth Godin. So there's only 3 copies. I think Scott's got one now. It's sold out. So I only created I think 500 of these things, and it's a creativity game. And so slightly different to how you think about it. It's like all of these books are randomized. Like there's no organization, because I realized I'd read books and I'd pluck out ideas. It's like similar to you, and sort of like, I read this book 3 times. I got 3 different copies, and there's different Post-it notes and things in there. And it's like, because different ideas like jump out at you. And I started collecting those ideas into an idea library. And as a game designer, I was like, oh, I can create a game out of this. And I created this creativity combinatory play game, which was what I do looking at my bookshelf. So,
Brilliant. Yeah. So that's your lens.
Like, I saw that in your book. Like, I loved all these analogies you brought in. I can kind of see how you connect dots. Seen it in your blog post since then as well. It's like, like I can see that sparks that idea.
The way you're thinking, yeah. But isn't that? I think that's really nice when you can see how somebody's thinking, because you actually have no idea. Most of us assume people think the same as us, or are just on a totally different level, and they are. One of the things maybe I'll share with our audience, because we were talking about this before we came on air. One of the huge drivers for me was my first job after professional rugby was digital transformation. We didn't call it that yet. It was just a job. Like, I don't think even the organization called it that, because I actually went in, I couldn't get a job. It was 2008. I had loads of jobs lined up, by the way. So I'd done loads of work preparing for the end. And then the end came in this period of absolute chaos, where not only was the jobs no longer there, the organizations that I'd planned to join were gone. They shut down. They were advertising agencies, etc. So this is the whole idea of creative destruction, that this was destroyed, but in the rubble, there was something that actually set me on a totally different path. So I got into digital transformation because I was told traditional advertising was going to be struggling. And in every organization I walked into, I'd see this like corner of these kind of snot-nosed punks. And I was like, who are those kids? And they're like, oh, they're the digital guys. And I was like, what do they do? And they're like, we don't know yet. And I was like, and then I had a little notebook. I used to bring around a notebook, and I'd go, because because of the rugby, I had access to the leaders of these organizations. I go, would you mind me asking you how much are they earning? And then they tell me, and then I realized that for their age, they were earning way more pro rata than people who would have started traditionally. And I needed that because my only source of income then was I was a coach. So I had to coach at the end. And I was very lucky that my former club, Lansdowne Rugby Club, they gave me a coaching role, and I got some money from that because I was on 18 grand in this starting job. So I had to find some way to try and just meet my basic needs of mortgages and stuff like that. And a kid on the way, like, can you imagine the chaos? And then the whole world's ending, you know, with 2008, 2009. So it was madness. And so in there, I was work shadowing this guy who was outsourcing everything. So he's outsourcing all the advertising to advertising agencies. And then I'd kind of meet the agencies, and I realized that they were learning on our dime, really, you know. And then I was like, why would we do that? Like, this is nuts. Like, we need that expertise in the organization, because we had 44 radio stations. I was like, we need that skill set inside. So let's build an internal agency. So pretty soon they were like, the consultant who was doing this work moved on, and they were kind of going, who are we gonna get to do this now? And I'm like, I'll do it. And they're like, what do you know? And I was like, well, I know one thing. I'm a few Google searches ahead of all the rest of you guys. and I'm dedicated to those Google searches. So that's what I did. And I just focused on that. But out of that, then built this new agency within the agency.
So what we're going to walk you through a little bit here is, you know, it's randomized up to like the 5 of these ideas. These are based on AI disruption, AI research, things which could be. Not that any one of these ideas on its own is the stop, but like looking at the possibility space. This is something which, you know, we've been researching for a couple of years now. What we're going to do, you're going to pick a couple from here, but before you do, we actually want to bring in a little bit of commentary play. So again, we're going to get you to incubate in real time by actually having you play a slightly different game. And then we're going to go back, and then you're going to choose which 2 of these ideas are going to come in. We're going to bring in ThinkCube. So you saw the earliest version of this game. It turned into an innovation tool because that was meant for game designers. And it sold out because a business blogger like wrote about it. Everything sold out to businesses. So I reached out to them to go, what was it you liked? Because this was for game designers, a whole bunch of games about games, you know, ideas about games. And they're like, we really like the creativity. Can you make it more business? You know, make it less cartoon-like, and you know, can you build an innovation system around it? So I did that. Anyway, we're not going to get into that, but here's the digital version of ThinkCube. So it is 6 randomly chosen cards from, you know, I think this is like 250, you know, idea deck. And we're going to bring in some of these, and we're going to do a little bit of commentary play with you. So, you know, ideas from, you know, like you say, killer app. I love that concept when, you know, I read about it, right? Yeah, Metcalfe's law, you know, which is like the network theory, like even like relativity and like through in science and things like that. And then the red cards are actually words. So just pulling up words and sort of thesauruses of biology, which is actually interesting as you think about what the idea you're kind of spinning on. But any of these like sparking an idea, how would you combine any of these to create something new?
I wonder, could you, so the biology one is cells, isn't it? Cellular growth. So cells and Metcalfe's law, the idea of almost like a network effect of cells around the ocean, just those 2 sparked for me.
So I love that idea. So we think about what's happening in synthetic biology, this idea of cells, you know, this idea of networks and networks. Like, so could Ireland take some of the latest research, go across your whole coastline, instead of having, you know, fish farms, could you actually be creating I was actually talking to my son last night, and he was talking about England and Ireland, and he's very excited, and we're hoping he can come, long as he's not rowing. And he was like, "Why doesn't England and Ireland just sort of like create these, like basically synthetically generate a larger country for themselves by actually growing?" So
A bridge. By the way, he can row over. A friend of mine rowed over recently, so
wow.
he'll be at the event actually, so we can introduce him. He's the
He would
first,
be
his first
inspired by
person.
that. But this
Yeah.
idea of this network and Metcalfe's law in biology, I love this idea. What can we grow, right? We're all talking about synthetic meats and like what else can we do which is going to drive sustainability?
Yeah, and I could even be growing some, the way some of the algae can destroy pollution.
Mm-hmm.
So you could be, it might not be a foodstuff, but it might be some type of natural pollution deterrent, or being able to soak up oil spills or something like that, or plastics in the ocean. So that's kind of what's marinating for me.
The other thing that I'll throw in that I think is interesting, and you went to one of those subwords from biology, which is cells. And as I've been, micro incubating on cells and Metcalfe's law and network effects, that notion of not only cells and synthetic biology to maybe grow things or eat pollution or generate fuel or something like that, but even the notion of using cells, groups of people. Now, look, the second I hear cells in a group of people, I think about terrorists. What if it was the opposite? What if this was also, part of the business model is based on the network effects as well as the core product, service, or whatever this looks like, that is also leveraging, network effects and cellular growth.
Yeah. And, you sparked for me the Stanley McChrystal, the book Team of Teams. If you've read it, brilliant. You're both nodding.
Yeah.
It takes a network to defeat a network. And that's kind of what was coming in my mind was, it's not only a network of people, but it's a network of cells that if you can propagate them, they'll self-propagate, and they'll, the danger with these things is that they get out of control because you're messing with nature, and nature's like, no, we got this sorted. We don't need your help. But if there was some way to limit that growth, but I've read a little bits about that, and there's something in that, in giving nature a little helping hand, but then removing yourself, so that's where it can't be profit driven, or else we won't stop when we need to stop.
Look, I'll add in one last piece. Look, I'll take the killer app idea and focus on the word killer for a second. Like, so one of the key things is, I think Daniel Dennett talks about it, is gray goo, right? That out of control, like something just goes on and on and on, and eventually like everything turns to gray goo. Like to actually build death into it, right? It is networked, it's its cell, it does grow, but it has, a death algorithm in it. So when it does start consuming a certain amount of plastic, it eventually will kill itself off after it's done its job. So we can actually create some limitations on it.
Love that. Yeah, I love that. I love that about cells. That cell death. It's like, I actually wrote about this, where that the whole idea of closing down a unit of your business that's no longer useful but is draining resources, and the whole idea of cell senescence. It's like kind of going, it's time for me to go now. Bow out. There's a great, I see it in sports as well, because there's a huge problem with that, where people know it's the end, but they won't let go.
You embody this notion that Kes and I have been calling nerd jamming for a few years. Like the way that we got through COVID in particular was literally talking every day and, just finding ways to get through it. And, so it is that sort of tangential thinking. It is divergent thinking. And it is a double-edged sword, and you've got that. So how have you balanced that narrow laser-like focus with the wide lens, like one of your incredible guests, Ron Adner, wrote about?
Yeah. So I think it's a nice segue, man. Nice job on the discipline thing, because a good way to think about this is a team I played for. they are the best team in the world. They're absolutely incredible. Is Toulouse, Stade Toulousain, a French team, and they're even better now than they were then. I don't have many regrets, but I kind of look and I'd love to play in their current setup that they have now, because they just have perfect culture, the way of playing, the style of playing, really good mix of players as well. But people look at them, and there's a term, jouer, which just means to play in French. And people will say, oh, that's a real style of jouer, where they just play free-flowing rugby. It's like freestyle jazz. But to do that, you have to have unbelievable discipline in the incremental jobs that everybody does. Everybody needs to know their job really, really well. And then they're led by this overarching kind of strategy or North Star of how we play. And the way I kind of translate that into business is the same thing, that you have to show up and do the work every day, making sure it's the right work that we talked about before we came on air. Make sure that that's the right work, but then you're driven by some type of North Star, some type of blurry vision of what the future looks like. And for me, with any kind of tangential thinking, is I do the reading, but I actually read it. And I was actually thinking about this recently. Somebody was saying, oh, I read that book you told me to read. And I was like thinking, I wonder what he means by he read it. As in, you can flick through a book and go, yeah, it's read, tick, it's task output thinking, or whatever you would say, versus qualitative reading it. And I think one of the great gifts that you guys will discover as you do more and more of your shows as well, is that when you read, knowing that you're going to actually interview the person and you're taking notes, and then you write about it yourself, that it's this beautiful combination of, you have to actually really consider the questions, and you have to really consider the quotes. Because if you're reading the book, like sometimes I have tons of quotes, and then you have to go, oh, what do I leave out, which is really difficult. But you're gathering this content each week, and then I purposely write about it. I try to, like, at any one time, right now I've about 300 articles in draft, and they're all driven by some type of concept that I have, some metaphor or some quote from some book. And sometimes I'll leave them there. And like even last week, about 3 years later, something somebody says in a show, I'll go, I think I might have a draft of that. And then I go looking through my drafts and I go, yes, I'll finish that one off. And that, for me, that's a real dopamine hit. I get this real reward of that. Total nerd. Like, yes, that's perfect. I can finish that. And what's beautiful is when you bring like 3 or 4 of guests' quotes that are unique to you, because they're not quotes that you've pulled from Goodreads or some brainy quote or something like that. That your quotes you've actually found yourself, and then you've infused them into an article that makes sense. And I think the practice of that, Scott, over years, I'm doing that now since the time I left that organization that I told you about. So nearly 10 years I'm doing that. Is that it becomes a way of thinking then, because you've actually trained it. You've trained yourself to think that way. So somebody will say something and I'll be like, and it's so bad now. My wife said to me, she said to me recently, somebody will say something and she go, oh, Aidan will probably write a blog about that.
Coming back to the game. So you need to pick 2 of these sort of disruptions around this idea which you started formulating.
Let me see. I love the idea of the digital mirror straight away. I love the term aqua alchemist, but digital mirror resonates for some reason.
And we're going to pick 2 again, leveraging more power of combinatory play. So no need to
okay.
Decide.
So 3 and 4.
3 and 4.
So when I got to really interesting projects, I'll give you one example. Total failure, but it was a great idea, right? It was called, we had a radio station called News Talk, and I had this idea where, and it wasn't unique, by the way. I wanted to build a platform that could be used in multiple ways across several of the radio stations. So one of them was, we had a station called Spin, and it was a younger station that played kind of like dance music and stuff like that. So I met the labels, and I asked the labels, would they give us song parts? So you could go in and sign up for this platform, and you could download the song parts, remix them, upload them again, and then there'd be a competition, you'd be voting, etc., and then the winning song would be played every week, right? So great, really worked really well. Then I wanted to use the exact same format, but this time for a different station, this news talk station, and people would send in their own reports, stuff they'd seen, videos, photos, etc. And I actually got Nokia to sponsor it back then. It just shows you how long ago it was. And Nokia sponsored this with this brand new phone that they had, which was after the iPhone. Interestingly, most videos that were sent in were iPhone videos. So anyway, we did those things, but when I did those, I actually didn't engage the station, and I didn't get real context about how it worked in a station like that, and the real levers that you needed to pull on that. But worst of all, I didn't have the language to explain what this was. And this had come from books I'm sure you've read, like Wikinomics, and reading books like that around crowdsourcing, and understanding that the power of the crowd, if you infuse them into your station, you create something new. And I don't think anybody's still actually done it, by the way. I think there's probably a real opportunity to be hard to do today with fake news, etc., and deep fakes. But the idea I still think is really sound. But I didn't have a way to articulate it in a way that was in their language, the people I was talking to. So it always looked like it was for me, and I was trying to sell advertising on the back of it. That's what they saw when they saw me come in. But actually, what I was trying to do was go, all the rising tide lifts all of us. That if we have more revenue, we can invest more in the digital platforms, we can build more apps, we can engage more audience, we can build more digital audience.
And the next step is a business model. And we've got 20 business models loaded in the knowledge base. The way that we did it in person was getting our nerd on once again with a 20-sided dice. A little bit more common, easier to come by for fans of role-playing games. But looking at the 5 that our strategic imagination machine randomly chose, what of these capture your imagination? And you know, we're also curious to dig in a little bit to how you think about your business model. You know, you've almost created this platform for yourself.
So will I first choose one?
Yeah, give it a shot.
Yeah. So I love the circular catalyst. It resonates in many ways. I was actually, again, writing about this recently, where there's an organization in Dublin, a trash company essentially, and I called the blog, it's in one of these drafts, From Trash to Treasure, and essentially they were taking the trash and they were turning it into these pellets and then selling it over in Finland or Norway or somewhere like that as fuel. So they were essentially using the trash and turning it, and they're a trash company, so it was a perfect story. So when I heard about that straight away jumped out at me. And then you're kind of doing the same. What I had the idea of the cell eating trash essentially is, maybe then there has to be some output from that. It can't be just nothing. That maybe it's some type of nutrient or something. I don't know, that you can program. So that one jumps out to me first, the circular catalyst. And it was only later, when I had started reading books, I started reading really old HBR articles. Going back to the start of HBR, I found somebody online had uploaded every old HBR articles and actually had scanned them in with PDFs. So I read all those, started reading stuff, started upgrading, and that's what I was saying to you, that I started to level up then. And the owner of our station then brought us to Harvard, and we did a course over in Harvard for a weekend. And that was a game changer for me, because it was, again, new lenses. And it introduced me to the power of education then as well, that when you educate people, then you get them onto the same level. Because after that was a pivotal moment. When we came back after that, and a few of the senior execs had been on it together, we were speaking the same language, and they knew that you were on a same strategic page as them. So that was kind of like again, one of these kind of failures that was reframed into a success, that you can see those things, you can look at them and go, oh, that was a total bomb, you know. Or else you can go, well, it was only by actually creating the chaos that was able to pull some order out of it. Because if you're going to do something new, it's always going to fail. So I think that's really at the heart of the work I do. And even with my kids, you know, I say to them, you know, you're always going to be bad at something at the start. Like, you have to go through this rite of passage where it's going to feel uncomfortable and you're going to feel terrible about yourself. But the people who actually do well are the people who realize that. And it's like this, as I say in the book, it's a milestone, not a millstone. So you see it and you kind of go, I reached that messy kind of middle that just comes before the dawn. And I think that's really important.
One of the things I recognize about you, and it's something which Scott and I have been, you know, I've been dealing with longer, I got Scott into reading a lot, is this concept of being an autodidact. Like, my research and my degree is computer science and artificial intelligence, which for a good, like, after I lost funding for my PhD because neural networks was never going to work, apparently. So deep learning wasn't going to be a thing. And my head of department like wrote a letter and got my funding. Anyway, long story, but basically, like, AI was done in my eyes. And like, I started learning on my own. I realized I learned more after university than I learned anytime during all the way up to that point. You know, I learned neuroscience. I went back and studied that. I studied economics and then strategy and innovation and creativity. And I found it fascinating how people react to it. And one of the things is that sort of challenge. Like, we're so used to being credentialed. Like, it's like, oh, like, I started doing all those TED Talks because I'd worked out this new neuroscience research on how our motivational system works. I'd actually talked to neuroscientists. I'd been working on game design for a long time, created this thing for games myself, and then transferred it to, you know, digital experiences. And it was this sort of, like, I think it was at one of those TED events where, you know, I'd been explaining my idea, done a talk there, and this lady was like, just, you know, pushed at me and goes, "But you're not a neuroscientist." I was like, no, but look, and then it was kind of like this, like, she was like, yeah, you're not credible. Just, and, you know, that sort of like knocked me back on my heels because, you know, I try to source my materials. I never claimed to be one. You know, I want to draw on those ideas. I was excited to share them when I came out. So my question to you is, as I looked at a lot of the things you've done, is what does it feel like to be an autodidact in a world where everybody's like, oh, you have to go and take a degree to learn that?
Yeah, well, it's happened in ways that I didn't probably even perceive. There's this great story of the deaf frog. Have you ever heard the story of the deaf frog? It's great. I love this, right?
Let's start pulling this startup idea together, right? You've got this idea of cells. You've got this idea that it is going to be this aqua alchemist. So taking stuff out of the oceans, you know, and the output of it, which can be used for something else. So, you know, bringing, you know, research together and basically going, hey, how can we take different kinds of things and maybe create outputs which are hard to get, and then trying to find like where in the world that they can do. So not only you're improving the oceans from a sustainability perspective, but then sort of pulling together. The bit I'm trying to map, and I'd love your thoughts on it, is the digital mirror piece, which, you know, for me, it's very much that, you know, digital twin, and, you know, how do you model it? So could we, you know, I think one of the side effects of this is to ensure that the kill function works correctly is to monitor the ocean currents. So yes, you're taking plastics out of it, but you never want to do anything which affects it. So could we create sort of a digital sim which you provide as part of this, because you're going to have sensors and all of these cells and sort of technology out there, could you actually be able to create this sort of sensory network to pay attention to what's happening in the oceans?
Yeah, and maybe adding to that, then the types of fish or the types of sea life that are in those areas, the there's islands around Ireland as well. Maybe you're better off putting this in an island. There's an island called Clare Island I visited this year, and they're doing amazing things to create this kind of digital island to test things. And you may find, one of the reasons I didn't suggest that was, like you said, I wondered about the accessibility of it. But if it was digital, it wouldn't matter, because then you'd go, well, this is how it would play out, So a digital twin, you could actually play it out before you even build it. So that's where that mirror part, because as you said, the location is absolutely key, not only from accessibility, from like one of the things I'm seeing here is it will become a destination, a business tourism destination that people will visit and go, this is how you do it. Kind of like Estonia, with the whole digital passport thing, that people actually use that as a business tourism destination, that Ireland could lean into its heritage of being a tourist destination, but actually add a business element to it. And that's where the accessibility piece is important. So I love that idea of the digital twin, because that would choose where to locate it big time on loads of realms.
All right. I think that's the start of an idea.
You have to have a belief. And sometimes that belief comes from ignorance, which is the deaf frog story, which is there was this competition from frogs where they had to jump out of the well, and nobody had ever achieved this. And so this deaf frog, it's his turn, and he's him going for it, and everybody's kind of sniggering at him, but he doesn't know that because he can't hear them, right? Which is great. So he starts jumping from leaf to leaf. Then he gets onto the stones. He gets closer to the tip of the well. They're all screaming. He sees everybody screaming at him. He's like going, yeah. Gets to the top, achieves it. First frog that ever achieves it. And afterwards, they come up to him and they sign to him, and they're like, why didn't you listen to us when we were telling you you'd never make it? And he's like, I thought you were cheering me on. And I love that story for the fact that when you do stuff that is beyond your realm of expertise, like you did there,
Mm-hmm.
is that you will always have that lady in the crowd. You'll always have somebody like that. But actually, when you kind of go, I don't care. I know that I'm speaking with a place of authority. And by the way, I'm saying this not from a position of, I'm saying this from a place of humility, because when you're a professional rugby player, people expect you to be that all the time. They don't actually see that, well, that was a period in time that, that ended in my 30s. That ended in my early 30s. I'm now nearly 50. Like, come on. That's 2 decades of life has moved on almost from since then. So what have I done with that time is more the question. And when you go through, for me, the experience that similar to you, Kes and Scott, with your experiences, is that you have some role that you're playing, some job that you're doing. You're picking up tacit, implicit knowledge all the time. You may not have a language for it. You may not have theories to be able to stick to the knowledge. And I think that's really important. And I think the sequence in my evolution is really important, that I did the work. I experienced it firsthand: resistance, failure of articulating the strategy right, but getting buy-in, forgiveness, not permission, all those things that we talked about. But only later, when I started to read and became a voracious reader of the stuff, I was like, oh man, how easier would it have been if I knew this stuff. But now I had this, it was like I had done the primer on the paint. I had the primer done, and now this was the first coat. And then every coat since then is adding more and more knowledge. But the world doesn't know that. And actually, in many, many cases, all they actually care about is the right outcome. So I'm sure I don't get talks and I don't get workshop gigs because maybe my credentials don't match. But I know that the work that I do, I know that I've read more than so many people in the world. There's probably a handful of people, maybe 100 people who have read to the level that we read, because the world is so full of distractions that to be able to do that means you're not doing a lot of other things. There's a huge amount of sacrifice that goes behind that. Drucker said, if you're going to do something new, you have to stop doing something old. So I don't do social media. I don't drink. I work when I'm working. I exercise every day. And one of the reasons I exercise is it gets more out of my learning then after I've exercised. So I'm more focused. I take in the learning more. I take notes. I then have the amazing privilege to interview the people. And then it just sticks, and the knowledge sticks. And then, as we talked about earlier, you're writing about it. You're creating your own version of that story, keeping the core message behind it. And then it becomes yours in that you can articulate it, no problem. So in the early days, Kes, what I say, the humility piece is I was so wary of, they're just going to think you're this washed up rugby player who's going to give a talk about what's transferable skills between rugby and the real world. And you know, a lot of times that happens with professional players, and like they have never worked in the real world, which is like, how can you then speak with authority about what it's like in the real world when you don't know what it's like? You know, you as a sports player, most people want to do that job. You're then driving change in an organization, an old organization. Most people are just showing up for the paycheck. You know, so it's a totally different thing. How do you drive change in a place like that? Is totally different than, you know, being a leader on a pitch where everybody wants to be there, everybody wants to be the best. Totally different. So one of the reasons I started to learn, and my wife only actually said this to me, really, she didn't realize this, was because I felt I had such a deficit, because I felt I had to make up for this lack of knowledge that I thought everybody else had. And then I realized actually they don't have it because they're not reading. And that, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. A lot of people don't have the time. And I'm so lucky that I've created a career that actually makes that time really important. So it's not like in the old days where I had to steal time wherever I could to read. Now it's part of my day. I read every single day. It's part of my day. It's essential part of my day. It's my competitive advantage now. I don't have the credentials to say that I did a course in that, whatever, but actually I realize more and more, once you deliver, and then the word of mouth between different clients, they speak to us and I go, no, this person will do a great job. Then it doesn't matter. They actually don't care as long as the outcome is great. So, and I think the people who look for credentials like that are actually just covering their own ass, and maybe need to because their organization needs that, or else they don't know. So they're actually using the credential as the insurance in case they don't know how to do it. So that's how I deal with it. I think it was Marcus Aurelius said something like, you have great freedom once you let go of caring what other people think, and you just actually embrace yourself and you go, I am who I am. I'll do what I do. And there'll always be great work once you do great work because people will recommend you to others.
So naming the startup.
I think I something around the whole emerald. I think you'd need to lean into that whole the Irish green piece. So emerald energy probably exists already, I'm sure.
Well, I think that is a solid prompt for our little sim. You got some encouragement here. It's an inspiring and visionary idea.
It always tells me that.
It's
no matter what bad idea. That's great, Aidan. It doesn't want to hurt my feelings.
totally solid. We've got the startup concept captured, some potential name ideas: Emerald Currents, the Celtic Cycle, Ecotide, Gaia's Force, Ocean Regenesis. Any of these spark any thoughts, or do any of them directly appeal to you?
Let's just go with Emerald Currents for now.
Starting out as academic, failed, and then having to go into the real world, feeling like I had to catch up because I was like, this is my superpower. I need to be able to read because everybody else is smarter than me about business.
Yeah, that's human, and I think that's a humility thing. It's like it's borderline for me, borderline lack of confidence, borderline. I don't think imposter syndrome, but borderline just that lack of confidence that they know more than me, but they don't. And actually, I think that's one of the great shames if they don't. If your senior executive team isn't updating time, and you as a leadership team or a board or a CEO or an owner of the business isn't giving them time, you're losing, because they actually can't see the world that you want them to see. I think that was a real realization for me, is like, there's nobody broken here. There's nobody failing. It's not like you're dumb because you don't know it. You just haven't actually given yourself the time to learn that new way of seeing the world. Even sport, once you learn a different way to do the thing, you're kind of going, oh man, I wish somebody showed me this a long time ago. It's the exact same thing in business, that you go, oh, I wish somebody gave me this way of thinking. But we actually don't talk about that whole time. We rate people on their strategic thinking unknowingly, and unknowing that actually we're partly responsible why they're not more strategic, because we haven't given them the time or the investment. And that's a huge thing, man. And the people who are usually really strategic don't know they are, but you can be damn sure they're usually reading a lot, and they're updating themselves a lot, and they're often doing it in their own time at their own sacrifice, which should not be the way. I think that's one of the biggest shames in the world that we know today, is that people are giving out about 3 days in the office or whatever. But I see this, and I do throw this out at the gauntlet to people, is go, but what are you doing at home? Like, are you working properly? I've seen people. I saw this guy walking his dog recently, and he was picking up his dog's droppings, and he answers a call, and he's like, "Oh yeah, sorry, I'm in a bad room. I'm just gonna move to a better Wi-Fi. I'll ring you back in 5." Picks up the dog's excrement and goes to get home to make the call. So you see that, and then you go, well, I understand people probably want to look after themselves more, and COVID was a real wake-up call to go, look, I'm extremely loyal to the company. The company wasn't loyal to me. Quiet quitting, all that stuff that we saw. But there is a huge onus on people then to autodidact, to self-learn, to use. If you are not using your full 5-day capacity, you should be using some of that to learn. You should actually be assigning time to learn. And more than that, I think that organizations should allow you to. The way I always put this in organizations is, go, imagine, so I'm running a workshop, and there'll be, say, Scott's the CEO, and I go, say you walked into Scott's office, and he's got his boots up on the windowsill, and he's reading a book, and you walk in, and you're like going, oh, it's well for some, Scott, just because you're the CEO here. Instead of actually going, he or she should do that every single day. They should do that. They should take 20 minutes, half an hour. More than that, they probably should meditate for 10, 20 minutes. If they were doing that, you'd be kind of going, oh, it's well for some. You own the business. No, everybody should be doing that, because you'll actually get more out of yourself in the day. And it's those shifts, those societal shifts, that it does take a crisis to make them happen. But I actually think COVID was one of those societal shifts, but it hasn't turned out the way that I think it should have, in that we should have more learning organizations as a result of this, and not weekends away, or not 2 or 3 days, like ongoing. Like do the days away. They're like the pit stops, and then the work's done on the track. Consistent learning on a regular basis, because it's the only way you can get better. It's behavior change. It's habit change. It's taking on new habits, and to take on a new habit, you usually have to get rid of an old one. So then the organization needs to step in and reshuffle how people work.
Well, and it's, one of my many strong opinions, loosely held, is that despite however many people might self-identify as knowledge workers, that they don't think of themselves, and they don't behave as what I consider to be a professional thinker. You know, so when you were playing rugby, when you were on the pitch, you were thinking about your body so much. There was a lot of mental training, of course. And to your point, that notion that so many people, you know, don't have the time, or what I have put on myself is it's up to me to make the time to read. I am a professional thinker. I get paid to help people come up with better ideas. I get paid to ask better questions. And the best way to have a good idea or a good question is to have lots of ideas and lots of questions. And the best way, until we fast forward to the point where Kes and I aspire to have the matrix and literally jack knowledge, you know, download knowledge directly into our brains, the most efficient and effective method that I know of is reading. And I love, one of the many things that I've seen about you is that transfer, maybe not of knowledge, but of practice from the pitch to the boardroom.
Yeah. And you know, I was actually, my wife was kind of saying this to me recently. She's kind of going like, why are these people hiring you? Kind of thing, you know? And she meant it. She wasn't trying to be insulting. She kind of goes like, you know, it's not long ago since you were a professional rugby player. And I made me think about it. I was like, I can see this now in my kids. So my kids, neither of them were, one of them's quite athletic and physically gifted. The older one isn't, but he's now winning MMA and jiu-jitsu fights like brilliantly, strategically. He's studying them. He's doing the work in the gym. He's constantly training. Both of them are now. So I was able to say to her, you've seen the transformation in the kids from these kids that weren't very good at sport to being the best now in their fields. That's partly behind that is what's called coachability. As a coach, if you're a coach, the one thing they'll always, their coaches, my kids' coaches will say to me is go, oh, they're great. They'll listen. I was going, well, it's great they listen to you. They don't listen so much at home, but they have what's called coachability, which is you will listen, you'll do the work, you're told what to do, you'll do it. Not only, and there's a big difference, and this is what I was saying about the reading. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference between showing up and training and training. Like, you go training, you're mentally present, you're taking on the knowledge, you realize when you do something wrong, you try to fix it. You realize you have a weakness, you stay back and you do 5 minutes extra passing or whatever it is to try and to come up to speed with that weakness that you have. So that's coachability. It's the exact, and that's what I had. I was saying to you, I was late in my career. I only started playing rugby really when I was 16, and I played for Ireland when I was 23. So in that period of time, I came up to speed. And then I was playing for the best club in the world, Toulouse, a few years later. So that was pure discipline, showing up, doing the work, not doing lots of things that other people are doing, like drinking. Kes, your story about your brother, many people have an original talent, and they either don't realize they have that talent, or they get bored of it because they have their curse of early expertise or early talent, and they kind of get bored of it and they kind of go, oh, I'm sick of this thing now. I'll move on to something else. I think when you go through the rite of passage of earning it and struggling to it, you own it then, and you're not going to let it go, because you're like going, I worked my butt off for this thing. So the transferable skill for me, Scott, was the coachability is the exact same as learnability. Learnability is the exact same thing. Because I wasn't really good at things, I had to actually break them down. And that's partly the metaphorical thinking, is break it down into the way that I kind of go, oh, that's all that means. And then build the theory around it. And I think that's the real gift that you can have if you don't come from a position of authority at the start, because it actually lets you off the hook a bit. You can hide behind credentials, Kes, like you talked about. But the people who don't and who are really passionate about it, they're the people who do really well. A place I said this first in my career was when I was working in transformation. I was saying to the stations, we should hire bloggers. We should hire bloggers as broadcasters. And they were like going, oh yeah, but they're not trained journalists. And I was like going, yeah, but they are way more committed than trained journalists. And they have this realm of expertise. That's a passion, not just a realm of expertise. they will go above and beyond. They live, breathe, they find interviews that other people can't. Let's hire them, put them on air. And I had the same thing where they didn't want to go with the risk of that because they didn't have the credentials behind them. And I think we've seen that shift in the world where it's like the credentialed people, it's great that they have it if they have this other passion behind it as well. But you can't fake passion. And I think that's where people will do well in the world of AI as well, is that you cannot fake that passion, that human passion, that you feel this person really cares, because you emit a certain energy in a workshop or a talk that people feel, which is why I struggle a little bit with the Zoom effect of doing keynotes on Zoom during the pandemic, etc. Is like, you want people to feel how much you believe this thing and you buy into it and you live it.
So we've got this idea that you've landed on, Emerald Currents, and we've identified 5 startup team archetypes, giving them some semi-clever names here: the Celtic innovator, the tech pioneer, the green champion, the industry transformer, and the EU connector. Now, this again is where you've got some incredible unfair advantages, really having the depth of understanding of the market and dynamics there in Ireland. So with this idea, which of these types of teams do you think is going to be most successful bringing it to market?
I think one, because you're going to lean into a lot of EU funding initially. I think I mean, there's no point in doing these things just on your own. You're going to get EU funding for them, so that makes most sense for me. And I'm saying that again with humility of not being a startup founder in this realm. So I'm taking the knowledge I know. I did a project on the EU recently with the EU, but apart from that, I haven't done any startup work. So number one, Celtic innovator.
All right. Well, you certainly seem to embody that term. And now we've got the final output. You've got some information about this profile. This is what's really going to play into the back end in terms of some of the strengths. Again, this is more like an RPG character card in terms of network mastery, cultural translation, some special abilities, of course, and some of the challenges. With great power comes great responsibility and many, many, many double-edged swords. So what we've got is this breakdown of the startup name, the arena, the location, the disruption patterns that you are leveraging, the business model, and the team archetype.
So one of the things which inspired me back in the day was reading Bill Gates's biography, and he used to have these reading weeks. And he'd take his books and he'd go, and it's like, oh my God, that's what I have to do. And I started creating different reading weeks anyway. So this has been with me. And I noticed at some point he flipped it to thinking weeks. And he's like, there's a whole documentary about it and like what he does. And one of the stories it reminds me of is, I think somebody was walking around Edison's, Ford, walking around Ford's offices. And there was this guy sitting with his feet up and literally doing nothing. And they asked him, it's like, so why do you have that guy? And he goes, well, yeah, about a couple of years ago, he came up with this idea, which, made us, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And look, I just let him do what he does, which is like, and that idea of like, he was thinking, that time to think. So when I think about reinvention, this is something which Scott and I have been, toying around, and we pitched it to KPMG. We were working on a design of it. And what we sort of did with Reader is executives, we kept on hearing over and over, and we interviewed lots of them during the KPMG days. And it was like, they didn't have time to think. Never mind time to read, they didn't have time to think. And it was like, can we give them that opportunity? So what I loved about the Reinvention Summit and what we got excited about sort of adding on to it was that, hey, can we bring a bunch of executives? Not only go to a conference, connect and network, but give them the time to think, give them spaces to think, give them inputs, right? And I love the, Gates, like he had whole staff like come up with all these things he has to read, and he like lands on his desk, right? That's how he came up with the internet, or pivoted to the internet, because these people had done this huge report, and it's like, you're missing the thing which is right in front of you. And he read that, came back, wrote this memo to the company. It's like, we're pivoting. And like that input, the time to think, and then the time to do. Like, I love Davos for doers, but to get to doing, you need the time to think and
Absolutely.
input and effort. So
Yeah.
that was one of the inspirations.
Yeah, the neuroscience piece is interesting in that one of the things I learned about that is, when a company, and I get this, sometimes they'll go, we have a great boardroom here, we have a great meeting room, we'll just use here so we don't have to book a hotel, and we'll use our own caterers, etc. And actually, the thing that I'll always suggest is, what happens is, if you go to a foreign country, so you guys will come to Dublin next April, you'll experience a different country, your dopamine centers get turned on massively. So you start to be more open to new information in a new environment. That's why when you go somewhere else, oh, this is beautiful, etc. And you could be living in Dublin and not see it anymore because your body, I saw you guys in one of your recent shows. You have such an influx of information that you don't have time to actually kind of go, well, what information am I letting in? It's because your filters are on so much so. So when you are used to an area, you shut off all that new information. So it's hard to take in new information all the time. You have to train that. You were talking about system 1, system 2 in a previous episode. So this idea of moving to not only a new environment, but a brand new country, and being able to then totally, everything's new. So your dopamine centers are firing like crazy. And then you add in this new information as well. So that new information is going to be absolutely beautiful for you, as long as the information is good, that is. But you're going to take it in a way that you could never do if you were taking it in your own office or watching it on a Zoom. I don't really get that watching a conference on a Zoom call, but the difference is the people together, the environment, the feeling, the novelty, all that stuff leads to an amazing experience. And that's what I love about what you're doing, bringing the senior executives to a thinking week. And it's more than just the content. It's the whole, everything's thought about. And I think that's what will make it a remarkable event.
You've taken this creator path, and you're really leveling it up now. You blogged, you've done podcasts, you wrote the book, and now you're doing this very, very large scale event with reinvention.
Many times members of the audience said, oh, it would be great for us to meet up, as in regular listeners, because I've connected them. I ran little kind of workshops where previous guests would come on and do a private workshop or private talk for members of the show, regular members. And it was a little bit of that, a little bit of frustration of actually, as being a keynote speaker, and I've had the privilege to speak at some great events, that I didn't feel the energy at the event. And I always feel the speakers are not included, as in the speakers are treated like they come in, they do their piece and they leave. And I was like going, what if you could create an event that the speakers actually wanted to stay? That the speaker didn't feel like, oh, this isn't worth my while, or I'm not part of this. So part of it was, if you could create something compelling enough for these great thinkers that are regular speakers around the world, that they would like to stay and partake in, then it's going to be extremely appealing to senior executives from all over the world. So the difficulty is to try and bring in, like we were talking about throughout this whole show, people who have the same strategic lens, so they feel they get it and they don't feel it's above their level of thinking in any way. So you want to have somebody who's open to that, open to the learning at the event, but also is already strategically upgraded to a certain point that they get it and they're not kind of going, well, what the heck's this all about? So there's that. And then really that the event has an energy behind it, like that people feel warmth and they feel connected. It's a networking event. It's an opportunity for people to really meet each other. And one of the things we talked about from a lens is the jobs to be done theory, is that it's satisfying the job for participants from different realms. So senior leaders, strategic leaders, also from consultants, people who work for themselves, solopreneurs, small team startups, scale-ups, that there's something for everybody there that they're going to learn from. And we've done a huge amount, as you know, to work with the people speaking there, working with you guys to build your workshop that you're going to run, your alchemy that you're going to unleash to create something that people just go, wow, that was awesome. So all those things are thrown in the pot. They're all the ones that are marinating. And now I'm going to use your trick of asking questions. How do I want people to feel when they leave the event is really the big question. And I want people to leave feeling that was the best event they've ever been at, that they really got something from, that they weren't just inspired, but they actually could take action on that inspiration, that they feel it was edutainment. So they also got a bit of entertainment there, that they met new people, that there was nothing that was filler. That's always a job to be done for me, that when you know that somebody's put into this to the lineup as a filler because they're a sponsor or something like that, drives me mad. And I know there's commercial responsibilities, believe me, but really resisting those things to actually make sure that every moment has been thought about, everything is combined together to create an overall 2-day story that people leave kind of going, I know why they had that person in there. I know why that person was placed at that specific point, that you're building these lenses. And across the day, you come away with some type of transformation at any level that you're open to. So that's what we're aiming for.
Well, it's been a truly a remarkable journey for you to get to this point, and the fact that we have now joined your band of merry misfits, along with 9 Yards and Nadia and Rita McGrath and Seth Godin and Charles Kahn. I mean, it's really something, to use that word again, remarkable that you have pulled together. And it really is just such an absolute honor to be a part of pulling this together and doing something different. And we don't know if it will work, but everything that we're doing suggests that it will. How do you think, maybe as Kes is tallying up how Emerald Currents fares in the mean world of strategic imagination machines and these simulated market environments, of just how big this could be?
Yeah, well, I think it's like that idea of the Emerald Currents, that you start off, you create a prototype. One thing I'm very aware of, there's so much goodwill towards this from the speakers, attendees, etc. And you know, I think about that book, The Mom Test, Rob Fitzpatrick, who I had on the show, and you know, the whole idea of your startup is don't ask your mom because she'll tell you it's a great idea. Is that you can create a false reality of progress, and to actually kind of go, is this something that is real, as in people really want to be part of it, or is it something that people are giving their goodwill towards in year one? I think that's a really important question to ask, because you go, well, what's repeatable here? And I'll be very, very honest. I said this to you guys from the start. I really do want to do it again. But if we do it and we do an unbelievable job, I'm also happy to go, that's it. It's done. It was amazing. We're all happy. We created something remarkable that we'll talk about forever, but it's too much of a stretch, or I don't think it's repeatable, or whatever, that I'm also happy to walk away. Like you said, I grip it tightly, but I hold it loosely. So I'm happy to let it go as well. So it could become something massive. I think it has the potential to. I'm open to that, but I'm also open to the whole idea of letting it go if it needs to be.
One of the other mental models that I love so much when it comes to doing this kind of work and trying things that have never been tried before. Nobody has tried to do what you and we are doing with Reinvention Summit. It might be spectacularly successful and scale to a level none of us can imagine. It might be a spectacular failure. And it's the notion of putting in the work and doing it, much like if you've ever seen Tibetan monks create a sand mandala, Are you familiar with this practice?
No.
It's amazing. And this was, one of the many incredible stories I got to shoot when I was in TV news back in Salisbury, Maryland. There was a group of Tibetan monks that visited Salisbury University, and they created one of these sand mandalas. And it's incredible to watch. They spend days with these tiny brass cones, and they scrape them, and it makes this fascinating rhythmic noise. And the cones have brightly colored sand. And the cones, as they rub it, puts out one grain at a time. And they create, over the course of days, these intricate, beautiful, incredible sand mandalas. And when they're done, they scoop up all the sand and they take it to running water and they release it back to the stardust from which it came. Beautiful. And that to me is something I've done so many times in my career. It is that notion of the phoenix or the immortal jellyfish, and reinvention might be another incredible sand mandala.
Beautiful, man. I never heard that. I absolutely love it. Yeah, the journey is the product in a way. So yeah, and I mean that I'm totally up for that, man. That if it happens and it's a beautiful mandala at the end, and then we go, okay, start the water, start the hoses. We're done here. Then we'll do it. So we'll just go with the flow. The one thing I do know, and the Chinese farmer story says it, is whatever happens, happens. So just embrace it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I'll just go with the flow. I'm getting better at that. I'm not always great at that. I'm getting better at it and just going where the universe takes me.
How do you think you did, Mr. McCullen?
I have no idea, man. I have no idea. This is new for me.
All right.
Ed, you look like, what was the movie? There was this series on TV, and the guy, when he was seeing, he went into this kind of trance and his eyes rolled and it's white. Kes went into that trance there.
It's his resting think face. So here are the results of your startup. Here's the TLDR. Remarkable success here, Aidan. You grew from 2.1 million euro to 112.8 million revenue in 5 years. Some perfect timing with EU green initiatives, strong technical innovation, ocean sustainability, had some market leadership. You really hit this intersection of synthetic biology innovation and climate action policy momentum. Take a look. That is a sweet up and to the right chart for revenue growth. Similarly for user growth, looking really, really strong. The starting to level out around the success score evolution. And Kes, maybe I'll kick it over to you to provide a little bit more of the voiceover in terms of the scoring that took place here.
Look, I mean, what sits behind this is synthesizing year by year. So we put in a bunch of macro signals. So we ran our adjacent possible inflection point macro signals across sort of 5 years. So you were going to be facing these challenges, which as a startup founder, you don't know what's going to happen, right? So we built that in. So we threw that in first. Then what it did is it took your startup idea and actually, played out through, desirability, viability, feasibility, and product market fit. Building out and modeling what we call sort of early, the adoption curve. So Everett Rogers, so it sort of went through all of this stuff and then sort of used the macro signals to kind of be the headwinds or tailwinds. And sort of mapped it out. When year by year, you have to build momentum to keep going, and sort of ran it through the simulation to kind of see how you did. And look, been running this a couple of different times since I finalized it yesterday, this version of the simulation for Ireland. And all of my startups kind of putted out around year 3. One of them completely failed in year 1. So this is, I was a little tentative because I was like, oh my God, our first guest, Aidan McCullen, I'm going to completely demolish his idea. So you did really well, brother.
That's great. I'm just gonna rest on my laurels now for 5 years. I just put my boots up and look out my window.
Well, the good thing I'll point out,
Ford factory. What does that guy do? He came up with this idea.
Well, I love that future Aidan is going to bring in 2027 quantum computing integration, because, that's become like the pixie dust of emerging converging exponential technology. Is just go, I don't know, we're going to put quantum in there, and then
Yeah,
it's
stick it in.
but it
Like
works.
AI a year ago. It's AI driven.
Well, Aidan, this is it for our debut episode of the second season, a completely reimagined and totally reinvented Tectonic, the AI thought show with Kes and Scott. It's been absolutely incredible to have this conversation with you. Kes, any final thoughts before we let Aidan wrap it up and put a bow on this?
Look, couple of things, right? So I think we talked to you about it. What we'd love to do is interview other speakers coming to Reinvention and have them go through this. And actually at the event, have each of the startup ideas compete. Like, we're going to take your startup ideas and actually have them compete across the 5-year period. So you can see at the event, every speaker, every strategist, every idea that they have, just as a fun way of sort of sparking this idea of what does reinvention mean? How do you bring startups into the mix? How does Ireland, navigate the next 20 years? So kind of a little bit of fun, a little bit of discussion, something to create engagement during the summit.
Brilliant, man. Well, I'm glad I came out well. That's my competitive nature, transferable skill again. It was a pleasure, guys. Thank you for your time, and I always, as I said, and I'll say it here publicly as well, I'm so happy to have you involved in the Reinvention Summit. You're going above and beyond, and it's greatly appreciated. And I know we'll be able to repay you at the summit, but I hope to repay you in other ways in the future as well. Both you, Scott, Kes, and Rita as well, and all the team of Feliz. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Aidan. And as we have come to learn, so often innovation is its own reward. And this has been deeply, deeply rewarding. So thank you.
Yes, thank you,
guys.
Aidan. This is amazing. We are so excited about the Reinvention Summit.
Let's build that San Mandala.
Wow. Aidan, so look, was I right? Anybody who thinks that Aidan McCullen is like, oh, he was a former professional rugby player and he just put on a new jersey and he started calling himself an innovator. Aidan McCullen is an incredible thinker, because, replaying that conversation, thinking back to it, what are some of your thoughts? Give me your hot take.
Look, I love the fact that, like you say, when you have somebody like this, does the innovation shows, the innovator has written a book on disruption, and far too many times when you meet these folks, and like, they're not great at actually doing the creative thinking, right? And look, we've been in multiple rooms with him very recently, setting up for the Reinvention Summit, preparing, and then getting on the show with him, and just seeing him live, being able to do this. This is what's behind what we say. Is like, let's put Davos for doers to the test. Like, this isn't just the audience who are coming to Reinvention Summit. These are the thinkers. Like this, let's not just have ivory towers and academics and people who write books, right? We know, we've been working with Rita for so long. Like, she lives this idea of discovery driven in so many ways. She tries so many different things up. She understands the startup nature. And that's what we want to bring together. Like, having him go through that game, having him sort of like tell his story, like, fascinating. It's like, look, we've been talking about this and this idea of long form content. Like, we've both inspired by, Colin Samir, this show that they do where they interview creators, right? And look, you're in the deep end, by the way. If you've been
welcome
Colin
to the
Samir,
deep end, y'all. Anybody who's still sticking around, you ring the bell.
Because this is the point where you've brought people along this journey, because it was a fascinating story. Like, not only did we experience it when we were recording it with Aidan, now sort of like re-listening to it live and having that sort of feeling, it's like, that was an amazing, amazing conversation with him. And to be able to give him the opportunity to tell his story. Look, too many times he gets on and he interviews these people and he's great at drawing out the stories from them. Even when he launched his book, it was talking about the book. Look, I wanted to hear his story. I wanted to know, how did he start the innovation show? How did he make that transition? He tells a little story in the book, but we got behind some of those deep stories, right? Where there's the deaf frog, like, his boss not really getting it, and literally like him just going off and doing the show on his own and starting it out. And, like, look, this is a real innovator at his heart. And just watching what he did over the last sort of over a decade now, and then building the Reinvention Summit, right? This is a new startup in a lot of ways, right? It's not about making money in his eyes. It's about, he wants to help drive, disruptions. He wants to help drive innovation. He wants to inspire people. I love that sort of piece where he goes, hey, look, I want somewhere that speakers come and they stay.
And they actually want to stay. Yeah. I mean, look, how many events have you been to where it's like, you see these headliner thought leaders and they literally parachute in. They show up and throw up, right? And it's so, they're the draw, and yet, they're kept on stage. And, as you're seeing this lead up to reinvention, Aidan was the first. Aidan was the bravest soul. Aidan took that leap. He trusted us. That was a total trust fall. He really had very little idea of what we were going to do. We sent him some descriptions, right? And of course, in typical fashion, leveraging incubation, working the way that we work, we were going up until just about the last minute. But we did share with him ahead of time, like, hey, here's what's going to happen. Here's a high level overview. And sure enough, after having that conversation with Aidan, after spending 2 hours with him, I had no doubt, like, we might not have even needed to email him over the weekend. That dude can roll through anything. And the fact that, you and I have shared this crucible year that was 2024, that notion that man, we've gone through at least one hero's journey, if not multiple ones. And part of what resonated so much with me when I read Undisruptible, Aidan's book over the summer, was it's his version of the elixir. He's not calling this reinvention because it's buzzy or because Accenture has, a playbook like, are you reinvention ready? That's one of their taglines. He has reinvented himself truly, fully, deeply. He's gone through that hero's journey, and he came back. We did work crafting. We've done Centaurian thinking and Mojo and Fluke surface area and Xeno mindset, because we're like, look, there's a reason it's a hero with 1,000 faces. And one of those faces is Aidan McCullen. And it's seriously, obviously, how geeked out I get. It's so incredible to know him, to get a chance to see him think in real time. That was amazing. That was so amazing.
Look, one of the metaphors which we've been talking about is the other side of the mountain. So, when you have, meet people like Aidan, and who, what we describe as, they climb the other side of the mountain. So, look, there's a lot of people who, go to school, do really well, go to university, study it, get their MBA, and get into the corporate job, build it up, become an innovator, become a leader, right? And then you have those people who have a slightly different path. And, look, he was a rugby player. He was a professional rugby player, did really, really well, saw the cliff coming and decided to do something about it, and then landed in 2008. But the story to me, which always fascinates me, is like, he went up the hard side of the mountain. Like, as much as most people think it's like, hey, getting into a good school, studying, getting A's, like, there's a map for that. Look, you have to work hard. Don't take anything away from the people who've done it and, scaled the highest mountains through the traditional path. But as somebody who's had to reinvent go from an AI researcher, which is me, and have to climb that mountain all on my own and, work out the path, finding myself in, leadership positions, the top management consulting firms, becoming sort of MD and all of that, BCG, being headhunted by Accenture. Like, that to me, like, we climbed the hardest part. And to hear how Aidan did it, because those are the stories which fascinate me. Like, I love that, he found all the HBR articles and, somebody had loaded them up and he was like reading through them. And he's like, he reads every single book and like goes deeply into them. Like the multi-series like he did with, like with Rita McGrath. Like that's how we found him. Like, because he'd taken her original book, The Entrepreneurial Mindset, like, which is
So good.
immediate.
It's so good.
It's amazing. And he broke that up. And even after 5 shows, they hadn't even got through it all. But that's how deep it was. His long form content. So look, this idea of doing a show and long form content has been something which most people go, it's like, this is crazy. Who's going to watch, this hour and a half plus show? But that's the stuff which I've realized, looking at the future of media, right? Those tight shows, which are built into an hour or 30 minutes, that was because people didn't realize that people would consume long form content.
Well,
we are
and
thirsty for knowledge, and that's what we did.
And we're seeing those signals. Look at YouTube. YouTube is bigger than Netflix. It is bigger than TV, and the long form content, whether it's, folks like Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan, it's Colin and Samir, it's Mr. Beast, right? It's there is so much out there. And when we did this deep dive, we realized we're like, wait, where's the really good long form stuff for thinkers? Right.
Mm-hmm.
You see lists like the Thinkers 50 and some of the groups that Rita's affiliated with, like the Silicon Guild. And it's like, I don't want to see or hear just another interview with them about their book. How many of those are there? And what's so fascinating is, and look, I used my editing skills, right? Going back to what I've done for decades before I reinvented myself as a strategic innovator and a design thinker and a consultant. Even though the first time I met a consultant at my TV station in Salisbury, Maryland, I was like, I learned the term insultant. And, I successfully learned, unlearned, and relearned so many things throughout my life. And seeing that in Aidan, seeing that he went up the hard side of the mountain, and then, creating this structure where when we were first starting to talk to people and say, hey, we're going to do a sim, strategic imagination machine. And we might even throw in ThinkCube, and we're going to do that with people, and we're going to have a conversation, right? You were like, hey, let's play a board game with Reid Hoffman, right? He famously talks about, Settlers of Catan and having those sorts of conversations, and you've done that in the past. And we floated the idea by a few people, and they were like, so you're going to play a game with smart thinkers, and that's the show? And we're like, yeah. They're like, how long is that going to be? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, we might play a strategy board game that takes a couple hours. And they're like, what? I go, wait, remind me, how long are NFL games? Oh, right. And what really hit me rewatching this, and I spent so much time over the past couple of days editing this, was that moment where we captured thinking in real time. As we've said, the future of business is real time. The future of strategy is real time. We think big parts of the future of media are real time. And we captured in real time Aidan McCullen thinking and having ideas, connecting people and ideas. That's exactly what we did. As he said, that spark of an idea. And I just love it so much. So look, props to you for pushing me out of my comfort zone a little bit, but serious props to Aidan McCullen, who is just absolutely a truly remarkable human. And I, as we said, I'm still pinching myself that we are a part of Reinvention Summit with him and Charles Kahn and Rita McGrath and.
To be the alchemists, like what we're going to do with 500 plus people, a live experience workshop, like that's the stuff which gets us excited. I know. Look, I will leave the audience. I'll leave you with this. Is like, look, that was just the start. We modeled out an economy, modeled out like how a startup survives across 5 years, using all the research, seeing around corners, frameworks that we'd built out. Look, that's not just scratching the surface. We're also building out a true strategy board game. So how do companies compete? We're going to have pieces where we're going to have people like who've been writing about business cases and taking a business case and actually simulating. Like you look at something like Blockbuster, right? Everybody goes, hey, they made the bad decision. They didn't survive, right? All right, we're going to put you back in that position. Now we're going to have you do it and to be able to simulate what those decisions could have led to. Like, could you have saved this company? Could you have actually gone back to Kodak? What could they have done differently? I'd like test this out. We're going to take business cases. We're going to take business strategy. We're going to take simulations and build them out. Look, yesterday we saw the documentary. We shared the documentary, Demis's Habis, and his story of how not only how he started DeepMind, went way back into how he built our games. The fact that he was building at Bullfrog, the game design company in Guildford, Surrey, he built out Theme Park, and he focused on the simulating of the customers. If you played Theme Park, Tycoon or Roller Coaster Tycoon, all of that simulation of how the customers respond to you, that's been my inspiration. Like, I want to build business scenarios like that. And we're actually starting to do it. We're actually doing it as part of our project. We're building a simulation of a business for a tax function. Who knew that people were really interested to work out? So as we move forward to the future, getting faster and faster, more and more data, digitizing the physical world, business is going to start feeling like real-time strategy games. Like, what happens if you have real-time strategy and you have to make business decisions on the spot? We're going to simulate that. We're going to bring some of the best thinkers from the Reinvention Summit and beyond to get them to play this game with us. And that, to me, is hugely exciting.
The best way to predict the future is to create it. And that's exactly what we are doing in real time here on Tectonic, the AI Thought Show with Kes Scott, our debut episode, our first episode, something we celebrate in the world of Warcrafting. We always fork towards firsts. So once again, I am your friendly, curious human, Scott Wolfson, joined as ever by my best friend and partner in possibility, Kes Panther, the Centaurian himself. Stay augmented, our friends.
Thank you.